The sharp rip of tearing paper echoed through the terminal, cutting through the usual airport chatter like a gunshot. Gasps erupted from nearby passengers as the flight attendant stood tall, her manicured fingers releasing the shredded remains of Malik's first-class ticket onto the floor. Her smirk was ice-cold, dripping with condescension. "I told you, kid," she sneered, brushing non-existent dust from her pristine uniform. "You don't belong in first class." Malik's heart pounded. His pulse roared in his ears. He stared at the crumpled remains of his boarding pass, his breath hitching in his throat. His mind raced. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be happening. "That was my ticket," he cried, his voice trembling between shock and fury. You just tore up my ticket." The flight attendant scoffed, folding her arms. "Oh, please. Where'd you even get that? Steal it. Print it off in your little school library." She turned to the security guard looming beside her. "Get him out of here. He's holding up the line." A large hand clamped onto Malik's arm. "Let's go, kid." Terror shot through him like lightning. "No. Wait. This is a mistake. My dad." "Save it," the attendant cut in, rolling her eyes. "Your dad can't help you here." Bystanders whispered, some pulling out their phones, recording the scene as the security guard tightened his grip. Malik twisted, desperate, his mind screaming for a way out. And then, what is going on here? The deep, thunderous voice sent a ripple through the terminal. The security guard froze. The flight attendant paled. The onlookers fell silent. Malik's breath hitched. He knew that voice. Heads turned as a tall, imposing man in a navy blue suit strode toward them, his polished shoes clicking against the tile. His expression was unreadable, but his presence alone shifted the entire atmosphere of the room. The flight attendant straightened, her smugness flickering into uncertainty. "Sir, I." The man's gaze dropped to the torn boarding pass at Malik's feet. His sharp eyes swept up to the flight attendant's face, dissecting her in a single glance. "Did you just tear up my son's first-class ticket?" he asked, voice dangerously calm. The words hung in the air, suffocating and heavy. The flight attendant blinked. The security guard took an uneasy step back. Passengers held their breath, sensing the weight of the moment. Malik's father bent down, retrieving the crumpled paper from the floor. He studied the pieces in his hands, his jaw tightening. Slowly, he straightened, his imposing height making the flight attendant shrink ever so slightly. "Sir, I didn't know," she stammered, the color draining from her face. His gaze was like ice. "You didn't know? Didn't know that you just humiliated a child? Didn't know that you just violated airline policy by destroying a valid boarding pass? Didn't know that you just made the worst mistake of your career?" The security guard cleared his throat. Maybe we should take a step back here." "No," Malik's father said sharply, eyes still locked onto the flight attendant. "She owes my son an explanation." Malik swallowed hard, watching as the woman, who had been so smug, so certain, now visibly trembled under his father's piercing glare. The power dynamic had shifted. The crowd murmured, many still recording, waiting to see what would happen next. The flight attendant's lips parted, but no words came out. She was cornered. The arrogance had drained from her, leaving only fear in its wake. Then Malik's father took another step closer, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "Do you have any idea who I am?" The flight attendant flinched. Silence stretched thick and heavy. Every pair of eyes was locked onto them, the weight of the moment pressing down on the entire terminal. And then, with a measured, deliberate motion, Malik's father reached into his suit pocket and pulled out a sleek, black leather wallet. He flipped it open, revealing an identification badge that shimmered under the airport's fluorescent lights. The flight attendant's eyes widened in horror. Her breath hitched. It was the official airline executive badge. Malik's father wasn't just some wealthy businessman flying first class. He was the owner of the entire airline. The flight attendant's lips parted, but no words came out. Her body went rigid as her gaze darted from the badge to Malik's father's face, then to the passengers who had their phones pointed directly at her. The tension in the air was suffocating. Malik saw the shift happen in real time. A moment ago, she had been confident, dismissive, certain that she was in control. But now that certainty had cracked. Her face paled, and her hands clenched the hem of her uniform as if she were trying to keep herself steady. She started, then swallowed. "Sir, I didn't realize." "Oh, you didn't realize?" Malik's father repeated, his voice deceptively calm. "Didn't realize what? That my son deserved respect? That his ticket was valid? Or that you were about to lose your job?" The last line landed like a gut punch. The flight attendant visibly flinched, and a murmur rippled through the growing crowd. People were whispering, cameras still rolling. The security guard, who had been gripping Malik's arm moments ago, took a noticeable step back, suddenly wanting no part in what was about to unfold. Malik's father took another step forward, his presence alone pressing down on the woman like an invisible weight. "Let me ask you something," he continued, voice razor-sharp. "When you saw my son, what did you see? A kid who didn't belong? Someone who didn't look the part? Someone you could humiliate without consequence?" The flight attendant's throat bobbed. "No, because that's exactly what you did," he cut in, his tone cold. "You didn't ask questions. You didn't verify. You assumed. And in that assumption, you exposed exactly who you are." The flight attendant's hands trembled at her sides. She glanced desperately toward the security guard, but he wasn't looking at her anymore. He was looking at Malik's father, with something that almost resembled fear. I was just following policy," she tried, voice weak. Malik's father let out a slow breath, as if reining in his anger. "Policy," he echoed. "Show me the airline policy that says you can rip up a passenger's ticket based on a hunch." She opened her mouth, but no words came. Because there was no policy. They all knew it. The crowd knew it. The people recording knew it. And worst of all, Malik knew it. A heavy silence fell over them. Malik's father exhaled sharply and turned to his son, his expression softening ever so slightly. "Are you okay?" he asked. Malik nodded, though his hands were still shaking. His father turned back to the flight attendant. "Pick it up." She blinked. "Sir." "I said," he repeated, voice hard, "pick it up." Slowly, the flight attendant crouched down, her fingers trembling as she gathered the torn remnants of the ticket from the floor. The once pristine paper was crumpled and ripped, a perfect metaphor for the dignity she had tried to strip away from Malik. She hesitated before looking up. "Sir, I don't want your apology," he cut her off. "I want you to understand the gravity of what you've done. Because the only reason you're still standing here right now is because my son has more grace than you do." A deep silence settled over the terminal. The weight of his words crushed the air from the room. The flight attendant looked like she wanted to disappear. Then, before anyone could react, another voice sliced through the tension. "Excuse me, what's going on here?" Heads turned as a man in a dark airline blazer approached, his ID badge gleaming. His sharp gaze flicked between the scene. Malik, his father, the terrified flight attendant, and the security guard who now looked like he regretted his life choices. Malik's father straightened. "You must be the supervisor." The man nodded, his eyes narrowing. "And you are?" A slow smile curved Malik's father's lips, but it wasn't friendly. It was the kind of smile that sent chills down spines. He reached into his suit pocket and pulled out another card, this one bearing the official seal of the airline's executive board. The supervisor's face drained of color. He knew exactly what that card meant. "My name is Jordan Carter," Malik's father said smoothly, "and I own this airline." The supervisor's throat bobbed. "Mr. Carter, I had no idea you were here today." Jordan's expression didn't change. Clearly, the flight attendant swayed on her feet. The security guard took another step back, as if hoping he could escape whatever storm was about to descend. Jordan turned to his son. "Malik, you still want to take this flight?" Malik hesitated, his gaze flicking to the woman who had humiliated him. A part of him wanted to walk away, to never set foot on that plane. But then he thought about what that would mean, about letting her win. About giving her the satisfaction of thinking she could push him out of a space he had every right to be in. He lifted his chin. "Yeah, I do." Jordan nodded approvingly before facing the supervisor. "I expect my son to be escorted to first class immediately. And as for her," he tilted his head toward the flight attendant, who looked seconds away from collapse. "She won't be working this flight. In fact, she won't be working any flight." The supervisor winced but nodded. "Understood, sir." The flight attendant opened her mouth as if to protest, but no words came out. She knew it was over. Security was already moving toward her, ready to escort her away. Passengers whispered amongst themselves, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others nodding in satisfaction. As Malik turned to follow his father toward the gate, he felt a rush of emotions, relief, validation, even a lingering ache of anger. But just as he thought the worst was over, his father's phone buzzed in his pocket. Jordan frowned as he pulled it out, glancing at the screen. Then his entire expression shifted. His sharp eyes darkened and his jaw clenched. Malik caught the change immediately. "Dad? What's wrong?" Jordan hesitated for half a second before turning the screen toward him. Malik's stomach dropped. An email notification flashed across the screen. It was from the airline's board of directors. The subject line read, "Urgent. CEO position under review." Malik's breath caught. His father's face was unreadable, but Malik could see the tension in his shoulders. Something wasn't right. And then Jordan exhaled slowly, his grip tightening around the phone. This isn't over. Jordan Carter's eyes remained locked on the glowing screen of his phone, his jaw tightening as he read the subject line again. Urgent. CEO position under review. Malik felt his heart thud against his ribs. "Dad, what does that mean?" Jordan inhaled deeply, forcing his expression to remain neutral, but Malik saw through it. His father was a man of power, of control, but something about this message had shaken him. "It means someone's trying to push me out," Jordan said, voice low. "And they're not waiting to do it quietly." Malik's stomach twisted. The weight of the moment pressed down on him. The flight attendant incident had just happened. They had barely left the gate. And now this? The supervisor, who had been standing awkwardly nearby, cleared his throat. "Sir, if you'd like to board now." Jordan held up a hand, silencing him. His gaze flicked toward Malik. "Son, I need you to go ahead. I have something to take care of." Malik hesitated. "But..." Jordan's expression softened, but there was an urgency behind it. "I'll meet you on the plane." Reluctantly, Malik nodded and turned toward the jet bridge. He cast one last glance at his father before stepping through, uncertainty swirling in his gut. Jordan exhaled sharply as he clicked open the email. The message inside was worse than he expected. "Mr. Carter, due to recent concerns regarding public relations incidents under your leadership, the board will be conducting an immediate review of your position. Further discussion will be held upon your arrival at headquarters. Board of Directors." Jordan's grip tightened around the phone. Public relations incidents? This wasn't about PR. This was a calculated move. Someone had been waiting for the perfect moment to strike, and now, thanks to that flight attendant's reckless behavior, they had their excuse. A slow, bitter chuckle rumbled from his throat. They were trying to push him out of his own airline. He turned to the supervisor. "Who's currently in the boardroom?" The man fidgeted. I believe Mr. Langston is leading the meeting." Jordan's nostrils flared. Of course. Thomas Langston, his so-called right-hand man. The same man who had been gunning for his position ever since Jordan took over. If Langston was leading the charge, then this wasn't a review. This was a coup. Jordan glanced toward the jet bridge where Malik had disappeared. His son was waiting for him. But if Jordan didn't act now, there might not be a company left for Malik to inherit. He made his decision in an instant. He turned to the supervisor. "Tell the captain to hold the flight for 10 minutes. The man's eyes widened. "Sir, that's against policy." Jordan's gaze hardened. "And I own the policy. Hold the flight." Without waiting for a response, he spun on his heel and strode toward the nearest executive lounge, pulling out his phone. His fingers flew across the screen as he dialed a number. The line rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Jordan, I was wondering when you'd call." Jordan's lips pressed into a thin line. "Cut the act, Langston. I know what you're doing." A low chuckle came through the phone. "Doing? I'm simply ensuring that our airline's leadership is making decisions that reflect our company's best interests." Jordan's patience was razor thin. "Spare me the corporate nonsense. This is about power. You saw an opportunity and you took it." Langston didn't even bother denying it. "You're not wrong. But let's be honest, Jordan. This was inevitable. You may have built this company, but lately, you've been sloppy." Jordan's grip on his phone tightened. "Sloppy? You think today's little incident went unnoticed? The media already has the footage. CEO's son humiliated by his own airline staff. Not a good look, is it?" Jordan's blood ran cold. Of course. The flight attendant's actions weren't just an isolated case of discrimination. They were being used against him. And Langston had probably been waiting for just this kind of scandal to push him out. Jordan's voice was deadly calm. "You think this will be enough to take me down?" Langston sighed, almost pitying. "Jordan, you're outnumbered. The board has already made their decision. The only thing left is for you to make this easy on yourself." Jordan felt a muscle twitch in his jaw. "And what if I don't?" Langston's chuckle was like oil on fire. "Then you'll go out in disgrace. But if you resign quietly, well, I'm sure we could work something out." Jordan closed his eyes for a brief moment, forcing his anger to simmer just beneath the surface. He was not going to let Langston win, but he couldn't fight this battle from the outside. If they wanted a fight, he'd take it to the boardroom. "I'll see you in headquarters," Jordan said coolly before ending the call. He turned and walked briskly back toward the gate, his mind already spinning with his next move. If Langston thought he could strip him of his airline, he was dead wrong. As Jordan stepped onto the plane, he spotted Malik in first class, his expression filled with concern. Jordan forced a reassuring smile and took his seat beside his son. Malik leaned in. "Is everything okay?" Jordan hesitated, then nodded. "For now." Malik frowned but didn't push. The flight attendants, different ones this time, moved around them, preparing for takeoff. But Jordan could barely focus. Langston thought he had won. He had no idea what was coming. The private jet touched down with a soft jolt, the wheels skimming the runway before rolling to a slow stop. Jordan Carter didn't wait for the seatbelt light to turn off. He was already on his feet, his jaw set with determination. Malik watched him closely, sensing the storm brewing beneath his father's calm exterior. "Dad," Malik asked cautiously, "what's the plan?" Jordan adjusted his cufflinks, his movements sharp and precise. "I'm taking back what's mine." The words were simple, but the weight behind them was undeniable. As the flight attendants opened the cabin door, Jordan strode forward, stepping onto the tarmac with the presence of a man who owned not just the airline but the air itself. Malik hurried after him, his heart pounding. He had never seen his father like this before, cold, calculating, and laser-focused. A black car waited at the edge of the runway, its driver already holding the door open. Jordan slid in without a word, Malik following closely behind. The moment the door shut, Jordan pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "Mr. Carter," a voice greeted him cautiously. "We weren't expecting you." "Cancel whatever expectations you had," Jordan interrupted, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. "I'm arriving at headquarters in 5 minutes. I want everyone in that boardroom." A nervous pause. Then, "Understood, sir." Jordan ended the call, his fingers tightening around the phone. Malik sat in silence, watching the city lights blur past the tinted windows. He had a feeling that whatever was about to happen next would change everything. The lobby of Carter Airlines headquarters was eerily quiet when Jordan stepped inside. Employees who normally greeted him with warm smiles now avoided his gaze, their whispers echoing against the high ceilings. He ignored them, his focus solely on the elevator doors ahead. As they slid open, he and Malik stepped in, the ascent to the top floor feeling both agonizingly slow and blisteringly fast at the same time. The doors opened to the executive level, where a long glass-walled boardroom loomed at the end of the hallway. Through the transparent panels, Jordan could see the entire board gathered, faces tense, eyes flickering toward the entrance. And at the head of the table sat Thomas Langston. Jordan pushed open the doors with controlled force, his entrance commanding the room's attention. Malik followed closely, staying silent but watchful. Langston leaned back in his chair, feigning nonchalance. "Jordan, you made good time." Jordan didn't bother sitting. He stood at the end of the table, his presence towering over the seated board members. "Let's not waste time, Langston. You've been planning this for months. You think you've won. Now tell me, how exactly do you plan to justify this coup?" Langston smirked, flipping through a folder in front of him. "It's not a coup, Jordan. It's a necessary transition. The board has expressed concerns about your leadership, particularly after today's PR nightmare." Jordan arched a brow. "Ah, so we're calling discrimination against my son a PR nightmare now." Langston didn't flinch. "We're calling it an unfortunate situation, one that reflects poorly on the company. Investors are nervous. Shareholders are questioning your decisions. The airline's reputation is on the line." Jordan scoffed. "Cut the nonsense. This isn't about reputation. It's about power. You've been waiting for an opportunity to push me out, and you saw today as your chance." A few board members shifted uncomfortably, clearly aware that Jordan wasn't wrong. Langston, however, remained steady. "You're not wrong," he admitted, his voice smooth. "I have been waiting, because under your leadership, this company has become too personal. You've built an empire on your name, Jordan, but empires fall. And this airline? It's bigger than you." Jordan exhaled slowly, measuring his next words. "So, what's the plan, Langston? You take over, run the company like a dictator, and hope the employees don't revolt." Langston's smirk grew. "Oh, I don't hope. I know they won't." Jordan narrowed his eyes. Something was off. Langston was too confident, too smug. That's when he saw it, a manila folder sitting beside Langston's hand. Jordan's name was scrawled across the front in bold letters. Langston saw him looking and chuckled. "Ah, I see you've noticed. This," he tapped the folder, "is everything I need to ensure your swift removal. The board has already signed off on the motion." Jordan clenched his jaw. "And what exactly does that folder say?" Langston slid it across the table. "Why don't you read it yourself?" Jordan flipped it open, and his blood ran cold. Inside was a dossier of alleged infractions, carefully curated and exaggerated. Misuse of company funds, poor executive decisions, internal complaints, all fabricated, twisted to paint him as an incapable leader. And at the very end, a termination notice, already drafted and awaiting his signature. Jordan looked up, his eyes burning with rage. "You set this up." Langston leaned forward, clasping his hands together. "I prepared for the inevitable. You made it easy." Malik, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "You think you can just take everything my father built?" Langston turned his gaze to Malik, his smirk never faltering. "That's exactly what I think." Jordan's hands curled into fists, but he forced himself to stay composed. He couldn't lose control now. He had built this airline from the ground up. He wasn't going to let Langston steal it from him. Taking a deep breath, he straightened his spine and looked each board member in the eye. "If you sign off on this, you're making the biggest mistake of your careers." A few of them hesitated, exchanging nervous glances. But Langston? He just laughed. "Oh, Jordan," he said, shaking his head. "It's already done." And then he slid a final document across the table. A formal press release, set to go live within the hour, announcing Jordan Carter's resignation. Jordan's heart pounded in his chest. His mind raced for a way out, for a way to stop this. But then Langston delivered the final blow. "If you fight this, we'll make sure you never work in this industry again." Malik inhaled sharply, his eyes darting to his father. Jordan's entire career, his entire legacy, was hanging by a thread. And Langston was holding the scissors. The room was suffocatingly silent. The weight of Langston's words pressed down like an anvil on Jordan's chest. "If you fight this, we'll make sure you never work in this industry again." Malik's breath hitched, his gaze snapping to his father's. The injustice, the betrayal, the blatant theft of everything Jordan had built, it was sickening. But Jordan? He didn't move. He didn't even blink. Then slowly he leaned forward, resting both palms on the table. His gaze burned into Langston's with an intensity that made even the most hardened board members shrink back in their seats. "You think you've won?" Jordan's voice was low, lethal. Langston smirked. "I know I have." Jordan exhaled then, to everyone's shock, he laughed. Not a nervous chuckle, but a full-bodied, knowing laugh that made Langston's smirk falter for the first time. "Oh, Langston," Jordan said, shaking his head. "You really don't understand who you're dealing with, do you?" Langston narrowed his eyes. "What the hell are you talking about?" Jordan straightened, adjusting his cufflinks as if he had all the time in the world. "You think you have leverage over me because of a few fabricated documents and a press release? You think you can erase me, Jordan Carter, from this industry?" Langston's jaw tightened. "You're done, Jordan. Your career is over. Accept it." Jordan took a step back from the table and pulled out his phone. With a few taps, he brought up a live news broadcast and turned the screen toward the board members. The room collectively gasped. On screen, a breaking news banner flashed in bold red letters. Carter Airline CEO forced out in corporate takeover amid racial discrimination scandal. Langston's face went pale. "What the?" Jordan tilted his head. "Oh, did you think you were the only one with a press release ready?" Malik's eyes widened as he watched reporters discuss the outrageous discrimination incident at the airport and the corporate coup unfolding in real time. Clips from security footage at the airport played, showing the flight attendant ripping up Malik's ticket, her smug expression a damning indictment. This isn't possible," Langston stammered, his composure cracking. I control this airline," Jordan cut in, his voice a whip crack of authority. "Not you. Not this board. Me. And I made sure the world knew exactly what you were planning before you could bury me." The board members were panicking now, whispering among themselves, some even pulling out their phones, probably bombarded with messages from furious investors and customers. Jordan's phone buzzed. A text from his legal team. "The emergency shareholder meeting is in place. You have the votes." Jordan smirked, slipping the phone back into his pocket. "Oh, and one more thing. That resignation you drafted for me." He pushed the document back toward Langston. "Consider it your termination notice instead." Langston shot up from his seat. You can't do this. Jordan raised a brow. I already did. Malik felt a thrill of satisfaction watching Langston's arrogance crumble. His father had been 10 steps ahead the entire time. The doors suddenly burst open. A legal representative, flanked by 2 security personnel, stepped inside. Mr. Langston, effective immediately, the board has voted to remove you from your position. Security will escort you from the premises. Langston's face turned an ugly shade of red. You can't do this. I built this airline with you. Jordan exhaled, shaking his head. No, Langston. I built this airline. You tried to steal it, and now you're paying the price. Security stepped forward, grabbing Langston by the arms as he tried to resist. This isn't over, Carter. You think you've won. Jordan watched him struggle, his expression unreadable. Then, just as Langston was dragged to the door, Jordan delivered the final blow. I didn't think I won. He locked eyes with Langston. I knew I did. Langston's scream of rage echoed down the hallway as he was forcibly removed from Carter Airlines headquarters. The room was dead silent. Jordan turned to the remaining board members. Anyone else care to challenge me? They shook their heads quickly, some scrambling to express their continued support. Jordan nodded. Then let's get to work. We have an airline to run. Malik exhaled, still absorbing everything that had just happened. His father turned to him, a proud glint in his eyes. Ready to learn how to run a company, son? Malik grinned. More than ever. But just as things seemed to settle, Jordan's phone buzzed again. He glanced down. The message was not from his legal team. Unknown number. This isn't over. Watch your back. Jordan's grip on the phone tightened. Jordan's eyes remained locked on the message, his jaw tightening. This isn't over. Watch your back. Whoever sent it wasn't just bitter. They were dangerous. Malik, noticing his father's tension, stepped closer. Dad, what's wrong? Jordan slid the phone into his pocket, masking his expression. Nothing we can't handle. But deep down, he knew this wasn't just Langston's petty revenge. This was something bigger. And it wasn't over yet. 2 weeks later, Carter Airlines was thriving. The scandal had transformed into a movement, with passengers rallying behind Jordan and the company's renewed commitment to fairness. The video of Malik's ticket being ripped up had gone viral, drawing millions of views, sparking debates, and forcing airlines worldwide to confront their discriminatory practices. Jordan's reinstatement as CEO wasn't just a corporate decision. It was a statement. He wasn't going anywhere, and neither was Malik. That's why, when Malik stepped onto his father's private jet for their first official trip together as father and son executives, he felt on top of the world. Until the plane's door slammed shut. Jordan's phone buzzed again. Unknown number, nice plane. It'd be a shame if something happened to it. Jordan's heart pounded. No, not here. Not now. A flight attendant approached, her expression unreadable. Mr. Carter, we're ready for takeoff. Jordan hesitated. His instincts screamed at him. This was wrong. He turned to Malik, about to say something, when suddenly the cabin lights flickered. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. Sir, we have an issue. Then, bam. The plane jerked violently, alarms blaring, Malik gripping his seat in panic. Jordan lunged toward the cockpit, his mind racing. Had they been sabotaged? Was Langston behind this? Or was this something even more sinister? The plane dipped sharply, throwing them against their seats. Malik's breath was ragged. Dad, what's happening? Jordan grabbed his son's hand, gripping it tightly. Hold on, son. The intercom crackled again. We're under attack. Jordan's blood ran cold. The final realization hit him like a freight train. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about erasing him completely. And they were willing to take his son down with him. The flight attendant, the one who had approached them earlier, turned slightly. Just enough for Jordan to see what was tucked beneath her sleeve. A black glove. A symbol. A warning. His breath caught in his throat. He knew exactly who was behind this. And just like that, everything fell into place. The sabotage. The threats. The real enemy. Jordan Carter had built an empire. But someone wanted him out of the sky. And now they were making their move. As the plane lurched again, Jordan made a choice. This fight wasn't just about business. It was about survival. And if they thought he was going down without a fight, they had no idea who they were dealing with. Flight attendant rips up Black Boy's ticket, unaware his father owns the entire airline. What do you think about this shocking ending? Drop a comment below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and most importantly, subscribe for more powerful stories like this.